Adriana focused even more on her painting after she aged into a teenager. It was her passion and she wanted to perfect the skill before she graduated high school. High school was also much more difficult than grade school was. She still got incredible grades, but she had to really work at it. She was not as naturally intelligent as Heidi was, as she had to actually study quite hard in order to do well. She wanted great things for her future, so she kept at it and continued to exceed all expectations. Betsy was beginning to feel some uncontrollable rage due to her hormone increase. She also had morning sickness every day after breakfast. She had yet to take a pregnancy test, but she was sure that they were expecting another child. Betsy finally told her husband of her suspicions of being with child again. Matty was surprised yet over the moon that they could once again be expanding their family. She said that she didn't know for sure if they were expecting, but had a good feeling about it. Matty suggested that she take a pregnancy test to be sure. Betsy agreed that they needed to know definitively, so they could plan for their upcoming arrival. Betsy went to the downstairs bathroom and took a pregnancy test. Having gone through this before, she was not the least bit nervous. She was shaking with anticipation to see those coveted pink lines on the test. Just as she suspected, she was eating for two once more. She couldn't wait to have one more child, the love of her life. She had always wanted a large family, and that dream was finally her reality. They would soon complete their family with one more bundle of joy. Betsy came out to the living room, where she had left her husband, and flung the test into his hands. Matty stared at the test in disbelief. His emotions mirrored his wife. He was beyond excited to complete their family with one more child. They embraced one another and basked in this feeling. They would never have this moment again. It was a bittersweet feeling. The revelation of carrying her last baby in her belly made her feel sentimental. She thought about her father, Matthew, often, but stayed away for fear of rejection. She knew she would always wonder if he also wanted her back in his life. She took a chance and decided to give him a call. She was surprised that he answered and was warm to her. She offered for them to reconcile, and he was receptive to it. He agreed to come over to her home in a week to talk through things. On the day of their meeting, Betsy felt overcome with nervousness. She cradled her growing belly for comfort. Matthew walked up to the Barton residence, and they greeted one another with a warm hug. Betsy and Matthew settled in the backyard to talk through their difficulties. Matthew apologized for how he had treated her during the most difficult time in her life. He had no excuses for his treatment of her, but said he had not been himself for years after Daphne left them. He told Betsy that he knew his wife would be rolling over in her grave if she knew how Matthew had treated her. He told her that he was finally over his grief and was in the right headspace for reconciliation if that was something that Betsy was open to. Betsy told her father that it would take time to heal the wounds of their past, but she would like him to be a part of her life again. He told his daughter that he was proud of the life she had paved for herself and apologized that he had no part in it. He said that he had seen pictures of her beautiful family from her but no longer wanted to see her life through pictures. He would like to be a grandfather to her children if she would allow him. Matthias came outside to check on his wife and her father. He shook Matthew's hand and introduced himself. Matthew thanked Matty for stepping up for Betsy and her girls and giving her the life she deserved. Matty corrected him and said that Holly and Heidi were their girls, but welcomed him back into the family with open arms. As long as Betsy wanted Matthew in her life, Matty was on board with making that a reality. Heidi took her role as big sister very seriously. She talked to Max often and was a maternal figure when their mother was not around. She loved him very much and wanted him to feel like his sisters cared for him, and like how Holly made her feel their entire life. Holly, on the other hand, took the approach of a dictator towards Maxwell. She bossed him around and made nasty comments at Heidi if she was undermining her authority over their brother. Heidi gave Max candy if Holly upset him, which angered Holly even more. The rift between sisters was never more apparent and palpable. Adriana marked the family calendar with all of her upcoming after-school activities. She had joined chess club, honor roll club, painting club, and prom committee. She helped get the house ready for their upcoming dinner with Betsy's family. Her father's family lived so far away, so she barely knew them. She was looking forward to having more family in her life. She hoped they accepted her like they would Holly or Heidi, since she was not biologically Betsy's daughter. Matthias cooked a ground meal for their dinner with Betsy's family. He wanted the evening to go perfectly because he knew how much Betsy wanted this. She often cried to him about wanting to have her family back in her life. He would do everything in his power to make that a reality. Adriana helped her father with cooking. He cooked the entree and Adriana baked the dessert. She had watched her dad make delicious meals her entire life. She had picked up some of his techniques, but was still a novice. Betsy greeted her sister, Anne. She had not seen her for years, and her face was a welcome sight in her home. She brought Steve and their 3 children along for the dinner. Betsy was excited to meet her niece and nephews for the first time. Betsy hugged her baby sister tightly when she saw her. She hadn't seen her since she was a child, and now she was a beautiful young woman. She had just graduated college and was starting her career as a journalist. Catching up with her sister was something she never thought she would get the opportunity to do again, and it warmed her heart to do so. They had once been so close, and she hoped to rekindle that bond again. She gushed about her pregnancy, and Charlene was over the moon for her sister. She hoped to be Aunt Charlene to Betsy's children after all this time. Holly greeted her dear Auntie Anne, although it had been a long time since she had seen her. They corresponded through letters. Their bond was still strong after all these years. In contrast, Holly was unwelcoming to Charlene. She thought her mother was silly to bring the family who had abandoned her back into their lives, so Holly made her opinion on that known. She was cold to Charlene and made fun of her. Matthias and Steve caught up. They had been good friends for years before they had married the Barton sisters. They had fell out of touch due to the lack of proximity, but their conversation flowed like they hadn't skipped a beat. Matty complained about the direction that the diner had gone in since Steve had left. Steve was the best server he ever worked with and jokingly begged him to move back and work for him. Steve wished he could, but he and Anne had a great life back in Brindleton Bay. Heidi embraced the new family members in her life. She always wanted a large extended family. Heidi met her grandpa for the first time. She knew that Grandpa Norman was her biological grandpa, but this was the man that had raised her mother. She was happy to finally get to know him. She had heard many stories of her mom's childhood and knew that Matthew was once a great man. She hoped to also meet that version of him. Matty called their large family unique to their meal. The entire family grabbed their meals and ate where they could. Most of the adults ate at the dining room table, and the children ate in the living room. Betsy's heart warmed with the sounds of laughing children and deep conversations. This reminded her of the family dinners she used to have when she was young, except much louder and more crowded. She knew her mother would have loved the sight of all of her children and grandchildren together finally. She wished her mom was here to witness the rejoining of their beautiful family. She never thought she would see the day of her father and sister sitting at her table again. The kids, aside from Holly, enjoy meeting and forming bonds with their cousins. They had only just met but would share bonds for life. Matthew watched his grandchildren with happiness. He wished he could change so much about the past but was happy to finally be here. Maxwell was reeling with excitement after the lively dinner party between his new family members and old family. He was young, but he felt so much love in that room and it made him quake with jubilation. played off that burst of energy by playing on his rocking horse. Holly wanted to get back into her parents' good graces, so she cleaned up the plates for their dinner party. She had acted uncouth towards a new family members, so she hoped cleaning up would cancel out the negativity she exuded. Adriana liked to unwind by swimming laps in their pool. Life sometimes felt so overwhelming for her, and the only thing that stopped her overactive thoughts was the frigid temperature of the water. As she got older, the longing to be wanted by a castmate gnawed at her. She had so much love to give, but no one gave her the time of day. Holly also sought solace in the pool, ever since her sisters forced Michael out of her life. She was unbearably lonely. She was the most popular girl in school, but she had no actual friends. She hated what her sisters did. The twins were about to age into teenagers today, and Heidi decided that she wanted to try to have a fresh start with her twin. She tried to initiate a hug, but Holly did not accept and pushed her away. She told her twin that she hated her and wished she was never born. She said that she hated sharing a birthday with her least favorite person in the world and just wanted to act like Heidi didn't exist. Heidi tried to reason with her, but Holly would not budge. They would be taking the feelings they have felt since birth into teenagehood. Holly blew out her candles first, much to her twin's chagrin. She wished for all the people who have wronged her to be humbled by her in this stage of life. She would not be the bigger person. Instead, she would get her revenge. Holly's teenager trait is that she is passionate. Holly's teenage aspiration is that she wants to be a serial romantic. Since she had gotten her heart broken by Michael, she wanted to break others' hearts instead. Heidi blew out her candles after her sister. She wished for peace. She didn't want her sister's hatred towards her to bother her anymore, and she just wanted to live her life for herself. She wanted to be happy and be fulfilled. Heidi's teenager trait is that she is likable. Her teenager aspiration is that she wants to be an academic. She wants to be top of her class and be the second woman to go to college, after Adriana, who was a year older than her. Holly took after her mother and joined the cheerleading squad. She was a natural dancer, which translated well into cheer. She quickly moved up ranks on the squad despite only being a freshman. She was the most popular girl in grade school, and she became even more popular and feared by her peers after joining the cheer team. She loved high school because she received the attention she craved. Holly was extremely vain. She took great pride in her looks and wanted to be lusted after by the boys in her school. She didn't care for academics anymore and solely focused on her popularity and beauty. She was conventionally attractive and had curves in all the right places, so boys fun after her. Heidi was the opposite of her sister. She never cared about the way she looked. She knew she wasn't as pretty as her sister, but she didn't care anymore. She focused on enriching her mind and bettering her life through academics. She was the smartest student in her grade, even ahead of Michael, and she took pride in that. One night after family dinner, Betsy went into labor. She was 6 weeks premature and was scared that the baby would be too little. Betsy's doctor was proactive this time around, given a history of her blood sugar spiking during labor and having diabetes. Her obstetrician hooked her up to an IV. As soon as she arrived at the hospital, he hoped to get her blood sugar levels under control before active labor, so they would reduce the risk of complications. Betsy was more scared this time around, but felt like she was in good hands with her medical team. They kept her on the IV drip for several hours. She was in labor for nearly 10 hours, but thankfully didn't feel much of her contractions. Matty eventually took a nap because they had been waiting for their baby's arrival for so long and needed to be rested to better help his wife through labor. After 12 hours of labor, Betsy began to feel faint, much like she did before giving birth to Maxwell. The IV helped some with Betsy's blood sugar, so it wasn't as dire of a situation as Maxwell's was when it came time to push. Matty was allowed in the delivery room, which Betsy was grateful for. Matty was such a calming presence for her while she was pushing. He whispered words of encouragement and told her how well she was doing. She focused on his words instead of the pain of crowning, and that helped alleviate some of her pain. The pain was intense, but she allowed herself to feel everything, and she tried to memorize this moment. This would be the last time she would ever give birth, and it was emotional for her. She pushed with everything she had when Matty told her to, and she pushed her final child out into the world. Betsy gave birth to another little boy. She was so excited for Maxwell to have a little brother. They named their little boy Kevin. Betsy was confused when she felt the need to push again. Within 2 minutes, Betsy gave birth to not one but 2 babies. This surprise twin was a little girl. They had not been prepared to have 2 children, so they frantically named the girl twin Karen, as it paired well with Kevin. Betsy and Matty stared in awe of their 2 babies. They could not believe they were gifted twins for their final pregnancy. The twins were a perfect mixture of the 2 parents. Their family felt complete with Kevin and Karen. The twins would be the perfect additions to their chaotic and loving family. Welcome to the world, Kevin and Karen Lauren, the final babies in the Barton Laurent family. Heidi and Adriana became like surrogate mothers to their little brother after their mother gave birth to the twins. Both Betsy and Matty were overwhelmed with their surprise twin, so the 2 sisters helped out when they could. Heidi took charge of Max's entertainment. She played with him often, especially after mealtimes when he had the most energy. He was a rambunctious boy and had more energy than Betsy and Matty could manage at the moment. Heidi enjoyed playing with her brother. Adriana took charge of Maxwell's bedtime routine. Bedtime was the hardest transition for Betsy and Matty, as the newborn twins were on differing schedules. Adriana tucked in and read bedtime stories to Max every night. She made sure to leave herself enough time to be able to complete her homework for the night. Max loved bedtime with his oldest sister because she made the funniest voices for the characters in the stories. She was animated and always made Max laugh. Their bond grew significantly during this time of transition. Betsy and Matthias had a harder time adjusting to life with a second pair of twins. They were happy to have them both, and their hearts overflowed with love for them. But they were older this time around, and were so tired. They had different needs at different times, and Betsy and Matty had a harder time establishing a routine, despite their family being turned upside down. Heidi maintained her routine when it came to her homework. She had to keep her title as top student in her grade. She and Michael had a friendly competition with who would be valedictorian come graduation, and Heidi was determined for it to be her. Heidi and Adriana spent all of their time together. Even in school, they were not the most popular in school, so they ate lunch together. Just the 2 of them. They did not mind this in the slightest. They didn't need other friends when they had each other. They had their own inside jokes, and often made fun of the popular kids like their sister. They thought it was silly to seek something so superficial like popularity. Popularity would not make them successful adults. Good grades and a strong work ethic would do that. They thought Holly made a fool of herself daily, and liked to laugh about it. She flipped her hair and swayed her hips, which made all the boys swoon. She did not have a single care for getting homework finished or studying for exams, since she got by on looks alone. Secretly, both Heidi and Adriana were a little jealous that Holly received all the male attention, but they would never admit it to each other. Heidi breezed through her exams. She was usually the first one to finish her exams, since she easily knew every answer. Adriana wasn't as quick as her sister with completing exams, but she still did well. She was not the top student in her grade, but she was close. She didn't strive to be better than everyone. Instead, she strived to do her best and constantly improve where she could. Holly joined her school's music club. She had a great singing voice and liked to showcase that to her peers. Singing became her new passion. Her peers stared at her in awe when she sang, and she wanted that feeling all of the time. Maybe she could make a career out of singing. Adriana and Heidi had one class together. It was their elective, and they took that class for the sole purpose to be in the same class. Holly went to her locker between every period to check herself out in her mirror and made sure to freshen up. If she had a free minute, she would attempt to study last minute for whatever exam she had forgotten about. She didn't care much about her grades, but knew she needed to do well enough to at least pass her classes. Adriana and Heidi were a part of several study groups with other students that took pride in their academics. However, the two girls were so close that they largely ignored the other students. They instead gossiped to each other and figured out answers to the homework questions on their own. It was not that they didn't want other friends, they did. They just felt that there was no need to make other connections when they had a built-in best friend with their sister. They felt like no one else would quite understand them like their sister did, and being each other's only friend did not bother them in the slightest. Sometimes, it felt like they had the same mind. They would answer a question at the same time, like they were reading each other's mind. Heidi wished that Adriana had been born her twin, not Holly. Adriana was not her biological sister, but she felt more her sister in every way. During lunches and after school, crowds of Holly's peers would gather in the outside schoolyard to watch her cheer. Holly basked in the fact that all eyes were on her. She received every ounce of attention, as she had craved her whole life while in high school. The boys wanted to be with her, and the girls wanted to be her. It was so validating for Holly to put on this pedestal by her peers. She exceeded her own expectations of being popular and feared. The three sisters shared one class together. Heidi and Adriana were confused how they were in the same class as someone so dumb, but Holly surprisingly performed decently in the advanced class. Part of them assumed that she dumbed herself down to impress boys, and that she was smarter than she admitted. Holly and Adriana had lockers near each other. Adriana usually avoided going to her locker because she tried to avoid Holly as much as possible. They were forced to live under the same roof. Adriana refused to give Holly the time of day unless she was forced to. It got under Adriana's skin how much effort Holly put into her appearance. She thought that school was for learning, not trying to get boys to notice her. Adriana's outlook on everything changed the day. Glenn Simmons called her beautiful and asked if she wanted to hang out sometime while they were waiting for the bus. Holly had to do what she did best and try to take the attention away from Adriana and put it on herself. Thankfully, Glenn didn't take the bait and was fully focused on Adriana. Heidi showed up at the perfect moment and tried to distract Holly from Glenn. Adriana agreed to hang out with Glenn sometime, but tried to play it cool. They solidified their plans with a hug. Just that simple act of affection sent Adriana's mind into a tailspin. Adriana found Glenn extremely attractive. She had a huge crush on him just from that simple interaction. Holly, on the other hand, found Glenn very unattractive. For Holly, it was not about whether she actually thought Glenn was hot. It was about making sure that Adriana didn't have him. It was all a game to her, and she wouldn't stop until Glenn was hers. Adriana and Glenn started out by spending lunches together. She was very inexperienced with male attention and wanted to make sure that this was not a cruel trick before she met with Glenn outside of school. Glenn surprised her in every way. He was considered very popular by her peers' standards, but also had several qualities that Adriana would not expect from a popular boy. He was a good student and took pride in his grades and actually wanted to go to college. He liked things that would be considered nerdy, such as robotics and chess. Most importantly, he was nice. Most of the popular crowd did not even notice her, and if they did, They were mean to her. Not Glenn. He was sweet and down to earth. What Adriana couldn't stand was her sister becoming a shadow in she and Glenn's budding relationship. Glenn was friendly with her because they were in the same social circle, so he never asked her to leave them alone. This irritated Adriana because she knew exactly what Holly was trying to do. It was always about being the center of attention for Holly, and because Glenn didn't fawn over her like every other guy, she had to take the attention away from Adriana. Holly went as far as bringing up Adriana's embarrassing childhood memories in front of Glenn. Holly was actively making fun of her, but did so in a way that went over Glenn's head, so he laughed along with Holly. Glenn simply thought that they were friendly sisters who liked to poke fun at one another. He had no idea of the rivalry that the two sisters have had since they were young. He suggested that they all hang out together. Holly eagerly agreed as her plan was working. Adriana could not object because it would make her look bad. Adriana took a play out of Holly's playbook and suggested that they also invite Heidi and Michael into their group. Holly objected at the same time as Glenn agreed. Holly would be the fifth wheel in this group. One day after school, Holly asked to speak with Adriana. She was unusually nice to her sister. She apologized for being so cruel to Adriana's children. Adriana was skeptical of Holly's motive but continued to listen. Holly complained that Adriana was attempting to date out of her league. She said that Glenn was better suited for her, and everyone knew it. Holly was more popular and would compliment Glenn better than Adriana ever could. She suggested that she give up on Glenn before she got hurt. Adriana declined Holly's suggestion and would continue to pursue Glenn because that is what Glenn wanted. This enraged Holly, and she began to yell at Adriana that she was being unreasonable and delusional to think that Glenn would stick with her. Betsy had been listening to the girls' conversation. She raised her voice and told Holly that she needed to respect Adriana and Glenn's relationship. She reiterated that Holly was the most popular girl in school and could easily find another boyfriend. She didn't need to take Adriana's. Adriana cleaned and changed Maxwell before his birthday party. It was hard for her to believe that her baby brother would soon age into a child. She was excited to see how their bond would transform and grow with Max as a child. Matty rushed home from a shift at the diner to bake Max's birthday cake. Their cook had recently quit, so Matty was back on kitchen duty on top of his manager responsibilities until they hired another chef. Matty finally maxed out his cooking skill and was very proud of his dedication to the craft. Betsy held her little boy as he blew out his candles. She wished for Max to excel in whatever he decided his passion was. Maxwell's childhood trait is that he is amusing. It would seem that he is the class clown of the family. His childhood aspiration is to be a social butterfly. Kevin and Karen also aged up into infants soon after their older brother aged into a child. Betsy and Matty were thankful to be rid of the newborn stage, but would miss their youngest babies being so little. Kevin's infant trait is that he is sunny. Karen's infant trait is that she is wiggly. Betsy had the unfortunate task of telling Holly that she would have to share her room with Karen. They had no other space for Karen, and Holly was the only sibling to have her own room, so it was only for Ew. Holly tried to reason with her that it would be better for everyone if Karen lived in Adriana and Heidi's room. When Betsy wouldn't budge, Holly did what she did best and lashed out. She said mean and hurtful things to her mother, but she would not allow Holly to walk all over her anymore. She said that her decision was final and Holly would just have to live with it. A few weeks later, Betsy aged into an adult. She wished for happiness for her children and to have more time for romance with her dear husband as their children continued to grow older. Betsy updated her look to keep up with the times. It was now the 1960s, and she wanted her fashion and hairstyle to reflect the times. Her previous look was outdated. Holly became a permanent fixture in the garage. She detested the fact that Karen now lived in her room and avoided being in there unless she had to sleep. She focused her energy on getting better at dance. Her ballet skill helped with her balance and memorization of cheer routines. She was still stewing about Glenn choosing Adriana. She would not stand to be second choice and would figure out a way to get Glenn to be hers. The chase was the best part.